Thanks for staying up later. Hal Holbrook, the much-honored actor, is here with us. He's won Tonys and Emmys, 4 Emmys, as a matter of fact, among 8 Emmy nominations, and presently is Evan Evans in the CBS series seen on Friday night called Evening Shade with Mary Lou Henner and, of course, Burt Reynolds. We'll talk about that in a bit, but it's inescapable when people talk with and about Hal Holbrook that Mark Twain is going to come up. So why don't we start with Mark Twain, because you have played him at least somewhere every year since 1954.
Yeah, that's true.
How essential is it to periodically reread Twain's work to get a fresher perspective?
Well, I tell you what happens. When you've done a character this long, it turns into you in a way. I researched Twain assiduously, almost like a monk. I spent most hours of every day either thinking of Twain or researching it for quite a few years, certainly for 5, 6, 7 years intensively, doing him also at the same time. But after about 4 years, it began, I was trying to squeeze myself into this character, to become this person, whom I didn't look like. I could see the makeup, everything. Try to get the voice as nearly as I could imagine it. And I finally came to the conclusion one day, which was difficult for me because I'm a perfectionist and a nut, that it wasn't possible to become somebody else. You can't. You can't squeeze yourself through that little crack. And then I started to relax and let myself come into the part, into the role, And then I discovered something about acting, which was, until you allow yourself to flow into this piece of work you're trying to create, the thing doesn't really quite take off.
Your program, your show, Mark Twain Show, evolves. You're always adding new bits of material and trying to make it more relevant for our particular times.
Yeah.
But initially, how did you go about researching it? Because obviously researching a person's character, an historical figure's character and personality and attitudes is different than researching specific events and occurrences. How can you be sure that you have the right take on a guy?
You can't. You have to do all the work you possibly can. And then you have to go on your own instincts. You can't, I've researched Mark Twain, very extensively. I've researched Abraham Lincoln very extensively. I've played Lincoln 3 different times at different venues. And you can never be sure. You always have to. Taking Mark Twain as an example, or Lincoln, one of the great sources for Twain and Lincoln to find out what they were like, what they sounded like, is newspaper reviews of their performances in public, or in the case of Lincoln, newspaper articles of guys who sat there and talked with him, interviewed him. Because in those days, they didn't have photographs. The 5 words to describe Lincoln's voice were high, shrill, flat, nasal, and unpleasant. Those are the 5 most often used words to describe Lincoln's voice when speaking to large crowds. See, so we're talking about research here. That's why I said when speaking to large crowds. One of the reasons Lincoln won the debates with Douglas is because he didn't lose his voice, and Douglas did. They spoke to thousands of people. Lincoln had a shrill voice that carried through the air, and Douglas, who had a great oratorical voice, lost it. That's one reason Lincoln won. So, but at the same time, if you're researching a character, you know that he didn't sit in his office in Washington and talk that way.
What was the greatest single misconception that you had about Abraham Lincoln that research reversed you on?
His voice. And I had to make a choice. When I played Lincoln, I had to make a choice. Should I do Lincoln, should I do it based upon research and try to do an honest account of Lincoln and confuse people and have a lot of critics say, Lincoln didn't sound like that?
Yeah.
Or should I do him, you know, as close to the truth as I can? Also, Lincoln, you know, what do you think Lincoln sounded like? Why did they make fun of him? He was the first president from way out in that western, in those days, western end of the country. I mean, there had been Jackson, but, you know, he was a hick. He was an ugly-looking man by anybody's standards. It's only after he became great and his soul flew into our consciousness that he became gorgeous.
Same question I asked about Lincoln. What was the single biggest misconception you had about Mark Twain going in, and that people generally have, that your research has turned on its ear?
Well, you know, this guy wasn't a lovable writer for children. I mean, I was brought up to think Mark Twain wrote, excuse me, I probably leapt right out of your frame, that he wrote books for kids. I mean, you know, when you read Huckleberry Finn after the age of 21, well, I'd say after the age of 30, you know, you say, good grief, this is a tremendous sociological tract. This is a history book. They should use it in teaching history of America. It's the most incisive sociological portrait of the center section, the great gut of America that we have.
You took a pass on performing as Mark Twain in the Nixon White House.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was really quite right of me to do that. I'll tell you that in rest. I don't want to go into a big, you know, I'll do my politicking through my work, you know. I felt that, you know, the response is, oh, well, everybody does things, you know. Look at Kennedy, look at, what's his name, John, look at them all, you know, they all, you know. But look, if you get caught, and you don't get punished, what does this say? I mean, it's like today, you know. People are, gee, the poor guy, he's on drugs, you know, and gee, the poor guy, you know, he's trying to recover. You know, come on, he's on drugs. Get him off of drugs. I mean, people going around feeling sorry for people who can't stand up and get on the ball. I mean, there's too much of this soft soaping. I mean, it makes me sick. The work ethic, the idea of self-responsibility in this country. Come on, other countries exceeding us economically. Nobody wants to work hard. You want to start, you don't want to start at the top. Everybody wants to be a star. Give it a break. Good grief. Get out and start doing something. I'm sick and tired of it. See, don't get me started on this. I'll get angry.
I think you started already.
I'm really fed up with it. I mean, something's happened to this country, and somebody better take hold of it, because we're slipping right down the drain. And there's too much soft soaping going on of people for laziness. Let's get to work here and do something. I mean, we're a great people. We have a great society that's been built out of great... You know, all this security business, you know? Just think of it. It wasn't much more than 100 years ago than people like you and me and our wives got in a very uncomfortable wagon with a cover over the top of it and set out across the wilderness, risking our lives, bouncing like this all day long, over in sometimes impassable wilderness to find the life. That's what our people did.
It wasn't easy for you when you were a kid. When you went to military school.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't
right? You went to military school, and when you were 8 or 9 years old, the headmaster there...
Everybody has a tough time.
The headmaster beat you up, right?
Sorry for ourselves, you know? A lot of people out there have a tough life. So what? I had a tough life. My mother and father left me when I was 2 years old, and I never found out why since, nor did my sisters. So what? I don't expect someone to come over and pat me on the head.
Did it leave you mistrustful of authority?
It left me a survivor. I had to find out how to survive. And I did, by George.
What was the key to it for you?
I wanted to live.
Were you reconciled with your parents eventually?
Well, my mother I've never heard of. I don't know if she's alive or dead. My father became a hobo. I mean, he was a guy sitting in the parks. And I found him after 18 years. At one point, I mean, you know, I lost track of him all through his life, but at one point I found him after 18 years. And I was making Magnum Force in San Francisco. And I got this strange circumstance. We have the same name, Harold Rowe Holbrook. I'm junior and he was senior. And something having to do with Social Security in Kansas City came to me for some reason. And it was a letter of his. See, his business in life was dealing with his Social Security. He used to make trips by rail to Kansas City to check up on his investment in Social Security. And this letter came, and I was in San Francisco, and the return address was my father at a hotel called the Alkane or Altane Hotel. I couldn't make it out, on Mission Street. This was in the 70s, early 70s, I think. So finally, I got in a cab a few days later, and I went down to see where this place was, and I went up, and I walked upstairs, you know, it was a little desk, dingy place, and he wasn't in. So I left him a note. So he called me, and, hi, boy, how you doing? You know, and I said, you know, Dad, I said, you want to meet me for lunch tomorrow? And I was ashamed to have him come to the Quality Inn. So I told him I'd meet him at a coffee shop a few blocks away. And so I got there, and I was waiting, and a cab drew up. And my father got out with a clean white shirt and paid the cab. He came in a cab. And my oldest daughter was in Berkeley at the time, singing in a club somewhere over there. And she was young, and she was into the rebellious, whatever. And she was using food stamps, I think, at the time. So she'd never met her grandfather. And so I got them together in the Quality Inn, overlooking the Golden Gate. And they sat there in the big picture window, these two people, this old man and this young woman, trying to make her way in the world. And me, and they were discussing food stamps. He says, where do you go to get, you turn them in? And she says, well, you know, I go down to the corner of Montgomery. Yeah, you know, the corner of that. You go to the third floor, and she says, no, I go to the sixth. You should go to the third. You get, well, how much do you get? And she says, well, I get $32. You can get $33.15. You go. So they're discussing, finally. He said, why don't you get money from your dad? And she said, I don't like to do that. He says, why not? He's rich, isn't he?
Did you feel like reaching into your pocket and helping your dad out?
I offered to help my father out. In the beginning, I was scared when I didn't have any money, and I was young. Because all I knew about him when I was growing up was that he would send telegrams to my grandmother, who brought me up for a while, asking for money. He was from Bolivia or Alaska. Send $50, you know. And I didn't have 50 bucks. And so I was scared. But anyway, finally, when I got a job in a soap opera, and once in a while I'd get a letter. I never got a letter, sorry. I got a postcard with general delivery. Never had an address. Always some town, Phoenix, whatever. And finally I wrote him and I said, you know, look, I'm making some money now, Dad, and I can pay you, I can, you know, help you out. And he told me he didn't want me to. And so I said, okay, someday if you want me to, you let me know. And so in 1966 or 7, I was doing a play in New York called I Never Sang for My Father, playing the son. And lo and behold, in the middle of the rehearsal period, I received a letter, not a postcard, but a letter from my father saying that he would like me to help him out. Weird, huh?
And what'd you do?
I helped him out.
Continuing now with Hal Holbrook, who is in the new series on CBS called Evening Shade, which has been really well received by critics and by audiences. Burt Reynolds plays the football coach. You play his father-in-law, although you're not separated by that much in age, which brings up some interesting
Burt's
situations.
older than I am.
In real life or on the show?
No. Sorry, Burt.
You're Mary Lou Henner's dad. Star-studded cast. Ozzie Davis is in it. Elizabeth Ashley is in it. What do you think, besides the cast, which is exceptional, what do you think makes Evening Shade work?
Linda Bloodworth, the writer. Linda Bloodworth is what makes Evening Shade exceptional, or could be exceptional if we do a good job. Linda Bloodworth, she's a wonderful writer. She writes Designing Women.
Yeah,
She's a wonderful, she comes from Poplar Bluff, Missouri. She's really writing about people she knows and loves. You know, it's interesting. I was thinking the other day, maybe one of the things about Evening Shade that people seem to kind of like, maybe they don't realize it, is that here she's writing about people who like each other.
You're playing King Lear.
Yes. Well, I did, this production was done in Cleveland. We did this in May in Cleveland, so we're bringing it here.
Limited run, or would you hope to make this
no,
a
well,
long-term
we're going into the Roundabout Theater, which has a subscription deal and everything like a real theater, and they do a series of plays, and we're going into a slot that runs from the 19th of October to the 23rd of December. So we will do about 70 performances, 10 weeks.
How much Shakespeare have you done?
When I was younger, I did a nice bit of Shakespeare, and I loved it. It was maybe my favorite thing to do. But since I started making money, I haven't done much Shakespeare.
Hal Holbrook on CBS's Evening Shade, and it's time for us to take our leave. Thanks for being with us. See you later.